Hey guys, and welcome to my 2006 BMW Z4 3.0i with a 6-speed manual. I'm gonna hop out and show you around, and then we'll take it for a drive. So I've had this car for about a couple years, maybe 2.5 years. I haven't cleaned it because it's been super hot outside, but this is the LCI BMW Z4. I like to just call it the facelift Z4. What's different on the LCI is the front and rear, and also the engine options and some suspension tweaks and changes. Taillights are different on the LCI. And then same with the front bumper. The fog lamps are different. They kind of integrated it more with the grille, whereas the pre-LCI kind of had those circular fog lamps on them. Show you under the hood. So one of the significant changes with the LCI is that they went to this N52 powered engine versus the old M54 engine. This is a 3.0i, so it makes about 215 horsepower, 185 pound-feet of torque. You can also get this in the S trim, which made 255 horsepower and like 220, 225 pound-feet of torque. That one had a 3-stage variable length intake manifold, whereas this is just a standard intake manifold on the lower output trim. Show you the trunk. So trunk, it's pretty small. You could probably fit a set of golf clubs in there. My dad has fit a set of golf clubs in there. He did have to take a few clubs out, but if you're going golfing, I think this would actually fit the bill pretty well. Yeah, 2 smaller suitcases maybe for a weekend drive is what you could put in here. Let's go in and take it for a drive. So the interior, pretty simple. Just your normal BMW business seaty. Nothing too special. It does have Bluetooth calling in here. No iDrive of any kind, none of that stuff. You could option iDrive though in this, I believe. I don't know if the earlier pre-LCIs had iDrive or not as an option, but I think the LCIs do. Very simple controls. You have automatic air conditioner. I like to keep it down for the video so you can have good sound quality. Just you got your lights over here, pretty easy. Automatic headlights. You've got steering wheel controls, which I don't think the pre-LCI had. So you got volume up and down, and then you got your track selection or your radio selection. Got heated seats, and then you got your buttons for your convertible top. Your DTC button, which is for dynamic traction control. If you hold it down, you can completely turn off traction and stability control. You got a sport mode button, which just affects the throttle, makes it more sensitive and quicker. You got these cup holders which break. Kind of put this one back in here to make it work, but this part's broken, so that's not great. And they're just kind of brittle. Not a great design, but it's out of the way, so nothing to get in the way of your shifting experience. But pretty simple overall. This is actually real metal. I believe it's aluminum. It's real metal though. It gets hot in the summer and it's cold in the winter. So I do have a few lights on the dash, airbag light, and then the other one's just for the turn signal. I just need to replace the right turn signal light. Airbag light I haven't been able to get off with my using my OBD2 reader, so I probably have to take it into a mechanic or a dealership to clear that or fix whatever the issue is. But I haven't had any mechanical issues with this car, been pretty good. Front wheels, we're running 225 R17, and then in the back it's 255 R17s. They're Michelin Pilot Sport tires. So let's just go ahead and take it for a drive, and I'll tell you more about this vehicle, about kind of how it drives. So first thing you'll notice is, if you're driving a manual Z4, you'll notice how light the clutch is. This is not heavier like my 5 Series. I have an E60 Generation 5 Series 2010 with the N54 engine. And it's a lot heavier clutch, but it's still, you know, decently light. This is just very light, very easy to control, very easily to modulate. Throttle is very linear, very sharp, pretty easy. Brakes, same way, also quite easy. The more brake pedal you put in, more pressure you put in, the more brakes you get. It's not like some of these modern cars where it just gives you full brakes at like half pedal. Like my mom's car, she has a 2013 Beetle, and it gives you like full brakes halfway through the pedal travel, which I don't particularly like. This is very linear, very easy to drive. The shifter is not your typical BMW shifter either. I know when you look at it, it looks like it is because just the shift knob, and it's just like maybe a shorter throw, but it's notchier and it's more engaging to drive with this compared to your typical BMW shifter. The throws are shorter as well. Just a more mechanical feeling shifter compared to maybe what you're used to in a BMW. This does still have the clutch delay valve on it. It's not as like intrusive as my E60, but it definitely can hamper like driving smoothly, so you do have to work around it. In general, if you heat it up, if you kind of get it warm, you heat up the transmission, it shifts a lot smoother. You don't get that jerkiness that you initially do when it's cold. Ride quality, it's probably what you come to expect. It's not a cushy ride. This is definitely a harder riding vehicle. It's not as bad as like say an older sports car like a C4 Corvette, for example. That rides like a skateboard. This rides a little bit better, has a little bit better damping, but it is still stiff. Don't expect this to be like a great riding vehicle and to do everything like perfect for you. So initially, the on-paper numbers, 215 horsepower, 185 pound-feet of torque from this 3.0i. They don't sound impressive, and the 0 to 60 is probably in like the low to mid 6s. Doesn't sound very impressive, but I think it's plenty enough power for this car. It does feel like it can handle more power, but the kind of big deal is that you can only use so much power anyways. The speed limits, even on the highway, are getting slower around where I live. So like there was a 65 zone that went down to 60 miles an hour, and that keeps happening in a lot of places, and so you can't really utilize the power, is part of the problem with a lot of cars now. And I don't think it's the fault of the cars. I think it's the fault of, you know, just lower speed limits. But this has plenty of power to be fun. It sounds good when you rev it out. Revs all the way out to 7. Sounds really nice, really smooth sounding as well. Has that nice intake resonance that you get from an inline 6. And just overall a good setup there. One of the other things I noticed with this transmission setup, the gears are actually quite well done. The gears are quite short. I believe second gear goes to around 62 miles an hour, 63 maybe. It tops out around that, and I think that's pretty much the perfect gearing. On the 5 Series, it's a little longer, probably due to the fact that it has the N54 engine and it just has all that torque down low like a diesel, whereas this doesn't. It still has good low end torque, don't get me wrong, but it's no, you know, it's no modern turbocharged engine. So clutch is just easy and forgiving. Just really easy to drive. Chassis is really quite good, quite solid. I mean, on the highway, cruising at 70, 80 miles an hour, this thing's solid, you know? Typical German kind of solidity and build quality. And I'll kind of give you an idea once we get out to this main road what the highway experience is like. There are some squeaks and rattles in here from some cheaper plastics and that kind of thing. They're just a little bit loose. BMW didn't put the greatest plastics in here and didn't screw them together the greatest. I mean, this car only has 68,000 miles and it's already rattling quite a bit, but it feels quite solid otherwise, and that's kind of the key thing with BMW from this era, is that you just get a really nice, good solidity to it. So on the highway, let's drop it into 5th gear. So we're doing about 62, 63 miles an hour. There is quite a bit of wind noise, but I mean, it's kind of what you expect from a soft top convertible. One of the things that I think a lot of people, when they initially see it on a spec sheet, will think, oh, this car is not going to have good steering. It's got electric power steering, an early version of electric power steering that BMW has. And BMW hasn't been known for their electric power steering. They've really been known more for their hydraulic steering. But with the new tires on this, this has Michelin Pilot Sport tires on it. It does actually feel quite good. Feedback is decent. It's not as good as an E90 or an E60. and probably a far cry from like an E46, which this shares a lot of parts with. But it does feel solid, it does feel good. Really the main thing that you'll miss when driving this compared to like a hydraulic rack is that weighting. The weighting on this is a lot lighter, and it doesn't weight up in a corner. So if you lose traction at the front, like if it's raining or if it's icy and you're going around a corner and you feel the steering load up on a hydraulic system, on this it doesn't load up. The weighting of the steering stays the same no matter what. So in that case, you kind of have to rely on what your seat is telling you and what the rest of the chassis is telling you, rather than the steering to tell you they have front grip or not. That is one of the knocks against this power steering system, is just you don't get that weighting, that confidence like you do in some hydraulic racks. But kind of speaking of chassis, this is a very connected chassis in my opinion. You can feel exactly when the rear is going to slip. It'll tell you ahead of time when you're about to lose traction, and when you do lose traction, it's very progressive in the way it loses traction, so you can correct it very easily with the steering. This is not like just going to catch you off guard with all the torque and all the power like some modern cars are. This is very easy and very understandable. It's a good learning car for learning driving dynamics of a front engine rear drive sports car. Yeah, and pedal placement's pretty good. Pretty easy to rev match and downshift. Take it around this corner up here, and this corner is very flat as well. Has really good front end grip and really good rear grip as well. Quite a enjoyable experience. It really feels hunkered down to the road, low center of gravity. I'm still getting a good amount of steering feel even on this smoother road. Those tires really do make a difference. So if you're wondering about initially what a Z4 is like to drive, and you drive and you're like, oh, the steering feel is really not there, it might simply just be the tires. Because once we changed the tires on this, the steering feel was far better. I haven't had any issues with oil leaks or with any oil consumption. No issues there. No issues with the cooling system either in the last 2.5 years that I've owned this. And kind of this era of car has kind of gone away. There's really not this kind of driving experience available anymore. So what's it like just to drive around town, as we're just kind of driving on this road, you know, 40-mile-an-hour road. It's not super fast. Well, like I said before, the ride it's stiff. I don't know if it's stiffer than some of the newer cars, but it's definitely stiffer than like just your typical SUV or car of this era. They're a lot softer and more just compliant. But I never feel like I'm losing contact patch at the front or rear because of the stiffer suspension. I always feel like I do have traction, at least in the dry. The suspension does still handle that very well. I still do have enough compliance that it's not going to mess that up. And that's kind of one of the big things as well, is I just like the way this engine sounds. You can really hear the engine. There's not any fake engine noise. And you can hear what the car is doing. You can hear what mechanically is going on too. Hey, so sorry about the abrupt change in scenery. My GoPro just overheated, so I have the air conditioner running and cooling it down. Some of the other things I was going to mention before I wrap up is just the fuel economy. My average fuel economy, I got 22.4 mpg. I've owned it since 60,000 miles, and like I said, in the last 8,000 miles, it's been pretty good, pretty reliable. The stereo system isn't great, but what do you expect? There's little to no bass. It'll get the job done, but not much more. The top motors for this also did go bad, so that's something that I'm gonna have to fix in the future. Probably relocate the top motors to the trunk. That's what most people do on these Z4s. I'll just turn that down for a little bit. But yeah, if you're looking for a kind of first sports car and you don't want to go for the typical Miata or maybe a typical like Japanese sports car, you want something a little bit different but you still want the two-seater kind of roadster experience, this is definitely something to look at. I don't know how it compares to, let's say, a Boxster or something like that. I haven't driven a Boxster and I haven't driven a Miata, so this is just my perspective from cars that I've driven, and I haven't driven very many yet. So, but the steering, like I said, is easily kind of fixable. If you put the right tires on it, you can get a decent amount of steering feel out of it. As far as everything else, I think out of the box stock, this is a good platform, good driving dynamics. Really, the main reason that you'd buy this over a Miata is the engine. This 3-liter inline 6 just sounds sweet. It makes torque down low and it revs out, and it really is kind of like if you were to take a 240Z and modernize it and make a modern 240Z. And so that's kind of my thoughts on it. I haven't driven a 240Z, but my dad had a 260Z and he always regretted selling that car, and for that reason I'm just not one to want to sell this car for my dad's sake, but also because I just really love it. Paint quality is really good too. I mean, for what it is, like I said, you could get a Miata. Miata probably has better steering, maybe has a better shifter, but you can't get a Miata with an inline 6. And styling's very subjective, but I think this is quite a good looking vehicle. That's gonna wrap it up for this. Hopefully I'll see you in another video. Goodbye.